So we are very excited to kick off session one of our three-part Strengthening the Family System series. Today's discussion will focus on de-escalation techniques for the whole family. I'm really excited to introduce our presenter, Chelsea Shepard. Chelsea is a licensed clinical social worker with over a decade of experience in neurodevelopmental disabilities and mental health. She currently serves as the clinical director, for the YAI START program, and she is also clinical faculty for SUNY Downstate's LEND program. Chelsea is a passionate advocate for individuals with IDD and works to ensure that all clinicians feel confident supporting patients of all abilities. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chelsea to begin.
Hi, thank you so much. And thank you all for taking the time to meet with me today and for being here during your lunchtime. I really appreciate it. If you want to eat, feel free. I won't see it because I'll have my slides up. I actually developed these slides a couple of years ago. Somebody reached out to me and said, "Can you do an anger management training for parents?" And I said, "No, parents aren't angry. They're stressed out. We all love our kids, but no, they're not angry. Sometimes when we're very, very stressed out and overwhelmed, we have moments where we're angry because we're all human beings. But what I can do is I can think about what kinds of calming techniques work for everyone in the family. Because when we have one member of our family who's having a hard time, everyone in the family is having a hard time. So the only way that we can actually really help that one person is by all of us using the same techniques and strategies together. So I'm going to share my slides. I did this right earlier, so hopefully I will do it right again. And I can't see the chat box, so I will answer all questions at the end, and I really welcome and encourage dialogue and questions. Because I
I
think we all
can
learn.
see the chat box, so if
Okay,
anything needs
okay.
to be addressed right away, I definitely will help with that in the background.
Perfect. All right. So this is not anger management. This is calming techniques for the whole family. Everybody benefits from calming techniques. So everybody faces hardship in their lives, right? Not everybody, thank goodness, experiences those capital T traumas, like violence or abuse. Although I think more people experience that than we realize, because it's not something that we always want to talk about with our coworkers or, other parents. But we all experience some kind of hardship in our lives. We lose people, right? Either, people move away from us or they move on. People pass away. We have big disappointments in our lives, things that we really wanted, we didn't get. So we all have hardships in our lives. When hardship becomes trauma is when we can't move forward from it. And that's a danger that everybody faces, right? Whether it's like one of those capital T traumas or whether it's 20 years ago, I really wanted this job that I didn't get, and I'll always think back upon that. So we really want to find a way to help ourselves move forward. Because when we're free from being tethered to the past as best we can, then we're more present to help our family in the current times. Our children learn resilience from us. And that's true for all parents, but it's especially true for parents of children with neurodevelopmental disabilities. Learning resilience isn't explicitly taught. I think that schools are starting to change that, which is why we're having conversations like this one right now. But I know for us growing up, when I was a kid, the concept of self-esteem was brand new. So people were talking about how to make yourself more resilient or what techniques to use. So our children really learn resilience from us. So when we're stressed out, they feel that even if they don't say, "Hey, mom, you look stressed today. Are you okay?" They feel it. It's in the air. It is in the atmosphere. And they cope how we cope, right? We all learn from the environment around us. So if we cope with stressful situations by yelling and screaming, then our kids are going to cope with stressful situations by yelling and screaming. And again, we're all human. I don't think that anybody can say that they've never been pushed to the point where they snap. But the goal is just to minimize those moments as much as possible so that we can demonstrate to our family the healthier way to go about things. Again, calming techniques really have to be used by the whole family. My current role of clinical director in Center for Start, we get a lot of parents who they're tired and they're worn out and they just feel let down by a lot of members of the system, and they'll say, I can't work on myself. I don't have the time. I need you to help me work on my child. And so that way we can move forward. Unfortunately, it really just doesn't work that way. I wish it did. Um, in order to help any member of the family, we have to create a culture of calming techniques and a culture, of emotional regulation within the family system. I don't know how many of you guys grew up hearing do as I say, not as I do. I love my mom very, very much. She's a wonderful person, but that phrase was used when I was a kid, and I can say it doesn't work, right? If kids see their parents eating a lot of candy after dinner, they're going to want to eat a lot of candy after dinner. If they see their parents blowing up when they're frustrated, they're going to want to blow up when they're frustrated. If they see their parents repeating negative relationship patterns, then there's a higher likelihood of them repeating negative relationship patterns. So it's really important that we find a way to practice what we preach. And, our kids are doing the best they can, even on the days when they want to wear shorts in a snowstorm and they don't want to go inside and they're kicking and screaming for hours. And it doesn't feel like they're doing the best that they can. In that moment, they're doing the best that they can. Today might be a tough day. Maybe they didn't sleep well. Maybe they have a stomach ache. Maybe something happened at school that they don't know how to tell us about. Maybe something's been on their mind. And maybe they don't even know what it is about today that's making today so tough. But children are always doing the best that they can. And so are we, right? Maybe today we have a short fuse, but we have a lot of deadlines at work. Maybe we didn't sleep well. Maybe we're just feeling so overwhelmed that it's hard to even feel like we have time to breathe. Um, so we're all doing the best that we can. And I think it's important for us to remember that for our kids and for ourselves, and to be a little bit more empathetic towards our kids and to ourselves as best we can. Not only do we want to have a culture of emotional regulation within the family unit, but that requires practice, 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 practice. And it's not easy. These things are so easy to say and make slides for and say, just be mindful, right? Just radically accept. It's not easy. It takes years of practice to get good at this stuff. It takes years for a neurotypical adult to say, I'm really angry right now. I'm going to take a step back and deep breathe and come back to it. Nobody's saying that this stuff is easy, but we can't only try to implement emotional regulation techniques when we're in crisis. That is the worst time to practice. So good times to practice these skills. It depends on the skill. Things like deep breathing, do it for 1 minute every night at bedtime. And your child might not be very good at it. They might go, or just completely ignore you like you're not even in the room. And that's okay. I think when we're really stressed out and we're in crisis and our kids are in crisis, we want the solution to come quickly. Why wouldn't we? We're stressed and we want something to make things better right now. Unfortunately, it doesn't often work that way. So even if we are deep breathing and encouraging deep breathing for a minute at bedtime, and they're ignoring us, jumping around the room, yada, yada, do it anyway. And then maybe after a couple weeks, they'll take one breath with us. And then maybe after a couple months, they'll do it sometimes. And even if they never do it, you know what? You're deep breathing for a minute. And I promise you that'll help you feel better. The best that I've ever felt was when I was an outpatient therapist with children, and all I did all day was teach deep breathing techniques. I was so zen because I was deep breathing for like 4 minutes 6 times a day, and it felt amazing. Um, so I can tell you all these things that I say sound maybe reductive, or I'm oversimplifying really complex problems. I know that these problems are really complex, but these things really do help. But they only help with practice. So, what kinds of things can we do to help ourselves and our children and our loved ones feel better? And our parents, right? So, deep breathing is, number one. It's great because you can do it anywhere. I found with kids, especially with kids on the spectrum or kids with intellectual disabilities, a visual really helps. Because a lot of the time, especially when they're first doing it, they tend to like hyperventilate a little bit. It's silly for them. They're going to think it's silly. They're going to be silly with it at first. And again, that's okay. You just want to slowly introduce. Another good time to do this for those who take baths is during bath time. Pairing this with the warmth of the bath water is actually really therapeutic. Or you can do it for yourself in the shower in the mornings before getting your kids up, because I know that's so stressful too. Um, so again, you can kind of deep breathe in a variety of different ways, but this is how I like to teach it, especially to kids, is smell the flower, count to 3, hold, blow out the candles. Blow out the candles. Um, and I even encourage kids, like when after you're done blowing out the candles, make a wish, because then we're really pairing deep breathing with positive imagery, right? Like we're taking them from having negative thoughts and steering it onto something positive. Um, Again, you can do this anywhere. I recommend trying to do it for a minute every day with your kids. And obviously, if you skip a day, that's okay, but it does make a big difference. Grounding techniques. So there's different reasons that people have a crisis, right? Or get really upset or frustrated. I don't like to use the word tantrum. Um, but one of those reasons is people get stuck in their head, right? And this is true for kids as well as adults. We're thinking too much about, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. I have a big deadline at work. I have a big deadline at work. I have to see my mom in a few weeks and I don't have a great relationship with her. So there's all these different things that kind of get stuck in our head. And the more we perseverate on this, the harder it becomes to kind of bring ourselves out of it. And that's doubly true for people on the spectrum, because they're naturally more perseverative. And so it's really important to help people find ways to come out of it. And a lot of these techniques, by the way, your children may never be able to naturally do them on their own because they have a disability. And that's not true for everybody, but it is true for some people. Some people with neurodevelopmental disabilities never get to that point where they can say, oh, I'm thinking a lot about how stressed out I am at school. I should use my grounding techniques. But we can be their external executive function and kind of recognize, hey, it seems like you're talking a lot about your anxiety at school. Why don't we try this really fun game? So I like this one, especially for kids, because it is grounding. It reconnects you with the senses in your body, but it is a game and it's fun. It's not that different from I Spy. So you want to identify 5 things you can see. This is not an easy part of this game if you're in an office that's all gray. But if you're in the comfort of your own homes, there's probably 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and optionally 1 thing you can taste. So you don't have to do that part, but sometimes depending on, your particular child and their needs and how helpful it is, people might carry around a piece of gum, or we don't want to give kids sweets when they're in crisis, obviously. But there's other things, an Altoid, for people who aren't going to choke on it. And the goal is really, again, to pull people out of their heads from perseverating and back into their bodies and really focus on that that sensory awareness. Walking mindfully. So this is something that you would do proactively. If somebody's having a crisis, or, they're really upset about something and they're yelling and screaming and laying carefully on the ground before kicking and screaming, I'm probably not going to suggest that you go for a walk at that time. But this is something that you can do on the weekends or in the evenings after school to just have a mindful moment. Um, the goal of mindfulness is to help people be more in the present, right? So when we're anxious, we're usually thinking about something that's coming up, whether it's coming up later today, whether it's coming up tomorrow, or, in the coming year. We might be anxious about work, about money, about our relationships with family members, about the health and well-being of our kids, right? And then trauma is when we're fixated on the past. This happened to me. I'm really upset about it. It was really scary. I can't stop reliving it in my head. So the goal of mindfulness is to take you out of the future and back from the past and really be present in that moment. No matter how much stress is going on in your life, if you are going for a walk, in that moment, you are going for a walk. And so all those things still exist, right? All your stresses and anxieties in your history, they don't go away. But it's nice to take a really quick 10-minute vacation from that. So when you walk mindfully, I really recommend doing this in a place that's has some nice things to look at. This time of year, it's a little tough, obviously. But it's really good to do when there's like Christmas lights somewhere, or in the spring to fall, it's obviously a lot better. I know when you live in the city, it can be harder to find greenery. So maybe go to your local park, or just a street that has a few trees on it. Um, and so when you go for the walk, the goal is to really be present in the walk and be aware of your body and yourself within that walk. Um, so ways to kind of begin to go on mindful walks is, how does it feel when your steps hit the pavement? How does it feel when the wind touches your skin? And these are questions that you can ask your kids. Um, And also ask yourself, maybe during your commute to work or bringing the kids to school, you can kind of take a second and look around you and think, oh, wow, it's kind of warmer today and that feels nice on my skin. And oh, that tree, there's flower buds on there. I'm very excited for spring. And oh, even though I hear a lot of honking because this is the city, I also hear a bird chirping. That's really nice. Um, and so when you're thinking all of those thoughts, you're not thinking about the future or the past. You're really present in that moment. One thing that we do, we have a resource center that unfortunately it's for adults, but we've been taking some of our more autistic guys on mindful walks, and they count the cars that they see. So that's a really cute way to do it too. Like, count all the blue cars, count all the red cars. What do you think about those? Um, Develop a mantra. So the first time somebody approached me about developing a mantra, I thought it was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard. Even though I work in this field, I'm really sensitive to things that I think are like oversimplifications of therapeutic models. And I think that we see a lot of, like, every time I go to Target, I see mindfulness coloring books. What does that even mean? You know? And especially, like, I don't like being really detail oriented like that. And so for me, those coloring books are infuriating, but it's just used as a marketing technique, right? So I'm really sensitive to things like that. So when somebody talked to me about developing a mantra, I had to do it for a class, and I thought it was so silly, and we like had to share them. Um, and then I ended up having a really tough year, and I ended up using that mantra every single day. And I think that it really saved me in a lot of ways. And so now I'm very much a proponent of developing a mantra. Um, we can use them for ourselves, right? And I think that it's really important to use them for ourselves, especially when we are feeling stressed out. Um, especially, if it's something that we feel we can't overcome. So there's a lot of different ways to develop a mantra. Um, and for kids too, right? Like a lot of kids don't feel like they're beautiful. I think that that's every teenager goes through a phase where they don't feel that they're beautiful. So, one of the mantras that we would encourage for teenagers and for other people who don't have great self-esteem is I'm beautiful the way I am. It sounds really simple, but we've seen it be very effective. The Parents Divorce one, Two Homes, One Heart. I actually developed that as part of a bigger social story that I did for somebody on the spectrum whose parents were getting divorced. His parents loved him very, very much, and they just couldn't be together anymore. And they didn't know how to explain to him what was going on. And so the father moved out, but they didn't say, listen, we're getting divorced. And so I think that the hope was that they could kind of skirt the issue. And it didn't work. He was very dysregulated. He was very upset. He started having a lot of behavioral challenges. And he told me, Miss Chelsea, Daddy doesn't live at home every day anymore, and I cry every day. It was really heartbreaking. Um, so what we did was we put together a social story and we explained that sometimes parents don't live together anymore. But even though you go to two homes, you're still a family. And then we said two homes, one heart. And again, because he's naturally perseverative, this phrase really stuck with him and became part of his script. And so he would repeat it all the time, two homes, one heart. So we were able to take a really painful situation and reframe it for him. And I think his parents repeating that over and over with him, it helped them help him, but it also helped them forgive each other and recognize that divorces are painful, parents separate, and that happens, but there's still one love in this family because we share a son. And so it really helped them heal. Difficulty with school. Sometimes we support people who have uh, stopped going to school. It's very hard to do that, obviously. Um, but kids get frustrated at school, right? I mean, if you have a neurodevelopmental disability, sometimes the learning material is just harder, even if you're in an appropriate classroom setting. Um, so helping them, again, develop that mantra, little by little, I'll learn it. And again, when we repeat that with our kids, we're reminding ourselves too. They're going to get it. It just takes time. More general, just keep swimming. And then religious, and these are just examples. Obviously, if you ever were to develop a mantra, you would want it to be personalized to you. But a religious example is through God, all is possible. So you want these to be short and simple. It really needs to be a catchphrase and something that you can repeat. Um, Whether it's for your child, for yourself, for your parents, and just say it a couple times a day. And again, I think especially when we're doing it with our kids, pick a time that you're going to do it every day. And if it's for ourselves, again, it could be like in our heads on the way to school. If it's our kids, say it over breakfast every morning a couple times. I'm beautiful the way that I am. Other people's words can't hurt me. I am beautiful the way that I am. And just, I think either right before bed or right in the morning, just to get people kick-started for the day and have a fresh start. But then again, when they're upset or when you're upset, you can reuse the mantra that you've been practicing to remind yourself and to ground yourself. And one other grounding technique is awareness meditation. This is slightly more advanced, but technology, which I mostly hate, is also a very beautiful thing. And so you can find guided meditations on YouTube. They have really short ones. Obviously, that's preferable when you're doing it with a child with or without a neurodevelopmental delay. But, even for ourselves to start, like we don't need to start off doing an hour-long meditation. Just 5 minutes is really more than enough. So this kind of grounding technique really it brings awareness into your body in a different way. So I'm sure you've heard it all before. I won't go through a full one, but the idea is to sit comfortably, sit straight up, be aware of where your hands are, be aware of how your feet are touching the floor, be aware of how you're sitting in your seat. And then you can start to move your body and focus on each body part one at a time. And again, the goal is really that mindfulness and to bring you out from all the things that you're worrying about and into your body. And I know that it feels like, okay, well, I have a lot of things on my plate, but what my kids are worried about is that they want a cookie and they can't have a cookie, and I'm saying no. And that's not the same as like having all these big future thoughts that they're anxious about. But a lot of the time, especially kids with limited language, the kids who are getting really upset about a cookie, it's because it's easier to say I want a cookie than to say I'm really stressed out because I'm worried that my best friend is mad at me, right? That's a really complex thought and a really complex sentence to say. Um, Cookie is just cookie. So I think, yes, kids want cookies. Yes, kids perseverate. Yes, children on the spectrum or with neurodevelopmental disabilities might be really rigid around the things that they want and their expectations. But I think that a lot of the time that gets worse when they're feeling anxious about other things. And so these techniques will still help. A note on radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is just a fancy way of saying accepting that we can't change something. So much easier said than done, right? But the classic example, and this was developed in the dialectical behavioral therapy model, is if you're stuck in traffic, you can get really mad about it, or you can just accept it. But either way, you're going to be stuck in traffic. No matter how angry you get and how much you honk your horn and how much you like slam on the gas and then slam on the brakes and yell and whatever, like you are stuck in traffic. You're not going anywhere. Or if you take the subway, you are stuck on that subway and it is maddening. But no matter how mad you get, you are stuck. And so sometimes we just have to say to ourselves, there's nothing I can do about this. And that's really, really hard, right? It's really hard in terms of accepting diagnoses that we're not ready to accept, or major life changes that we don't want to have happen. It's hard to accept that people are who they are and we can't change them. It's hard enough to accept that we're stuck in traffic. But if you can come to radically accept certain frustrations in your life, and that's not the ones that you can change, right? There are things in our life that are frustrating that we do have control over, but some of them we don't. And so, working on, again, using a mantra and saying, I can't change this, it is what it is, can really, I think, help your quality of life. Our kids can't radically accept, not in the same way. It's just not something even neurotypical children are very good at first. Maybe if you work on it with them for a long time, but it's just much, much harder. But if we can decrease our anxiety, then we have a higher threshold to help them when they are anxious or upset or afraid or angry. So it's still worth trying to radically accept. And then what do we do after a crisis? What do we do if somebody gets really upset? Maybe we're in public and we actually try to use our coping skills, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, and maybe we end up snapping and yelling because we're all human. Then what do we do? So it's always really important to try to process a crisis as family members. I think probably a lot of us come from backgrounds where like the families maybe get in big fights and then the next day it's like it never happens and nobody ever talks about it and nothing gets better. And we don't want that for our kids. And even if our kids have a neurodevelopmental disability, um, they're still aware, right? They're very perceptive. They know that we got in a fight and we never addressed it. And there's always going to be that discomfort and that feeling of lack of connectedness as a result. So even though it's hard and it can be awkward, I really recommend trying to process a crisis. It doesn't have to be a big, painful, emotional thing. But try naming the emotions that you were feeling. Uh, Admit if you were wrong. It's okay. You're human, and it's okay to show kids that I know maybe I shouldn't have yelled just then. I was feeling really frustrated because if I ask you to do the same thing many times and you don't do it, I get frustrated. But I love you. Um, so discuss the why. Why is it frustrating? Well, I asked you to put your coat on many times and you were running around, and that was really frustrating for me because we're trying to get to school on time. And depending on the child, you might make your language a lot simpler than that, right? You want them to process what you're saying. So it might be as simple as, I get frustrated when you won't put your coat on. It's time for school. We want to meet our kids where they're at. Um, and then discuss the what. What can we do next time? Maybe next time we can put our coat on, or how can we help them differently? Use of a timer. Oh, the timer went off. It's time for the coat. So the what can be collaborative, right? What are our expectations, but what can we try to do differently? And then the most important thing that we can do, and I hope the biggest takeaway that everybody gets from this PowerPoint, is to practice forgiveness. Being a parent of a child with a developmental disability can be really frustrating and really hard. It's important that they know that you forgive them when they get upset, even if you're frustrated and you don't want them to do it again. And it's important that as parents, you forgive yourself. Nobody is a robot. Everybody is going to lose their temper sometimes. Nobody's going to do things right every single time. And again, kids are so perceptive. I don't care what their IQ is. I don't care what their diagnosis is. They are perceptive, and they will know if you are feeling racked with guilt and you're not feeling good about yourself, and that will make them feel less emotionally safe. And B, again, they learn from us and they learn what we model for them. So if we beat ourselves up about things, then your children are going to beat themselves up about things. And what happens when people beat themselves up about their behaviors is it shortens their emotional bandwidth to do better next time. Because now, next time, not only are they upset, but they're mad at themselves for being upset, and they're anxious about how it's going to be received from other people. And so I think if you process a crisis and you reframe it to yourselves and to your kids as a collaborative approach and a learning process, then everybody's working towards a common goal of emotional regulation instead of this negative cycle of punishment and trying to do better and failing to do better, and everyone's mad and everyone's frustrated and everyone's wanting to tear their hair out. So again, nothing that I said today is easy, but I think over time and dedication and consistency, it can really help. And I have seen it help a lot of families.